Hello, everyone. I'm Mandeep Singh, Senior Technology Analyst here at Bloomberg Intelligence. I'm happy to host this roundtable on cybersecurity for financial services, readiness, response, and remediation. We've gathered a line of business executives from leading financial institutions to discuss their strategies for recovering from a cyber attack. They will discuss their data architecture, cyber resiliency plans, and organizational as well as technological preparedness today. Before we begin the program, a few housekeeping notes. This is a virtual event, so please bear with us if we experience any technical issues. If Zoom crashes or you get disconnected, please close and reopen the application or refresh your browser and log back in. If you have other applications or web pages open, please close them now. In some instances, they can affect your bandwidth and ability to interact with everyone. We want to keep this discussion conversational at any time. If you like to chime in on a topic, please use the raise hand feature at the top of your Zoom window. And if you want to speak, you can click this button and I'll do my best to call on you. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. And we want to make sure we hear from everyone. So please make sure to keep your comment short, not more than 1 or 2 minutes per question. So before we get started, I would like to introduce Corey Hamilton, partner, IBM's Security Services, Global Financial Services Security, who will say a few words. IBM is sponsoring today's virtual roundtable. So Corey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Hamilton, and as Mandeep mentioned, I am a financial services partner at IBM. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank Bloomberg Live, Mandeep, and our global group of technology and security panelists for your time, and appreciate you all discussing this highly relevant and important business priority of cybersecurity. So there are two important topics within cybersecurity that are at the top of all of our minds. How do we secure the digital transformation, and how do we deliver operational resilience? On the digital transformation side, it's no longer just the enterprise, it's the ecosystem of customers, products, partners, and vendors. How we protect them has changed. Hybrid and multi-cloud environments are becoming the norm, along with a data-rich environment that requires AI, machine learning to rapidly analyze and produce insights to really inform our critical business risk decisions. Then on the topic of operational resilience, the pandemic has highlighted the importance of regulatory requirements for the resilience of critical systems, processes, and more generally, the ability of the financial services sector to continue to operate in the event of disruptive events. However, as we see or hear about each week in the headlines is another enterprise that has fallen victim to a cyber attack or whose critical systems are offline due to ransomware. Again, just a couple of topics, but again, I'd like to thank all the panelists at Bloomberg for the opportunity. Now, Mandeep, back to you to get started.
Great, thank you, Corey. So what I thought I'll do today is, really when it comes to the pandemic and how much technology has shifted as a result of the pandemic, I thought a good starting point would be just digital transformation. So the fact that every company, whether it's a large size organization or a mid-size or small size, talks about digital transformation these days. I mean, when I look at it from a security perspective, I feel the attack vectors or the surface of exposure has grown as a result of digital transformation. So maybe that's a good starting point for all our participants to just have their views around how they think digital transformation has changed the cybersecurity requirements in their enterprises. And maybe, Danielle, I can start with you, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for the question. Of course, I mean, the moment you enlarge your technology perimeter, and digital is a lot about that, you transform, if not increase, the amount of attack vectors you are exposed to. At the same time, we need to be clear what digital transformation means, because the moment you start increasing automation, the moment you start improving our application architecture, the moment you start improving your software development practices, you start reducing the attack surface that usually comes into, I would say, the human holes across the automation chain. And this is something which is, of course, massively improving the resilience at the end of the day of the system. Take what happens on a very a very complicated, simple action like the DevOps automation of software development lifecycle, which seems trivial, but in reality is bringing the risk of, I would say, bad code entering production massively to a lower level. And this is a part of the digital transformation. So yes, there is more technology, but it's also a different way of using technology, developing technology, and deploying technology that has the potential to increase the level of control you're having on your attack surface.
Yes, thanks, Daniel. So Adam, maybe, when you think about how the amount of data that is being created now versus what it used to be 2-3 years back, like how do you go about securing that data? Like how do you think about it? Is it about adding more firewalls? Is it about adding new types of security? How do you secure that data footprint that is growing?
Yeah, it's a great question. First and foremost, understanding where the most sensitive information assets are inside the organization, and really building out your plan on how you want to protect those information assets. And then, identity becomes a very big part of who's getting access to that data, tying policies to the data and how you allow it to move throughout the enterprise or leaving the enterprise. And then there's an education piece, I think, that's critical, whether it be, customer awareness or employee awareness, understanding that we are creating data exhaust as an organization or as an individual. And we have to make sure that they understand, one, how to manage the data exhaust that they're creating. But two, I think to Danielle's point is, threat actors are picking up on the massive amounts of data that are being created, whether it's in your enterprise or you as an individual. And I think that's an important point that people need to understand, that it's going to be collected at scale and it's going to be used at scale to target individuals and organizations. So really kind of keying in on where your sensitive information assets are, making sure that you've got strong identity practices around who can access that data. And then obviously, tying it to policies that govern how that data moves across the organization or out of your organization.
Got it. And Asif, if I can come to you, I mean, you at PayPal, obviously, you see a lot of transaction flow, and in addition to, I guess, crypto and all the new things that we have added in terms of the data volume. How do you go about just kind of protecting the data, in terms of the type of transactions that take place, as well as the volume and velocity that has grown so much?
I think I'll chime in and agree with most of the people that spoke before me. It's knowing where the data is to start with. And in a lot of places, we've been, as an ecosystem, an industry, we've been focusing on understanding where data assets are and what those data assets are and what the classification or sensitivity of those data assets are. And I don't think that we've found, the best solution so far as an industry in the identification of everything. And as we're shifting into public cloud environments, and we've all seen the explosion of incidents that had to do with open S3 buckets or unencrypted data sitting in places where it shouldn't. So the start of everything is just knowing where your data is and where the proliferation of data across the organization is. And then going into what people call zero trust, what we call internally explicit trust, is the understanding of who has access to that data in a very granular way, and understanding each and every transaction and the flow of data throughout the organization. And using those as first principles, then you can start talking about a more holistic way to understand and control data. The one thing I'll say about this is, and we've been on this journey for a while, it's not just about the security controls that you have around data assets. It's also about our partners that manage data assets across the organizations, and the teams that are in the end of the customers of that data, and working together to create proper data classification, data inventory, data lineage, and then having that more holistic view across the environment.
Great. And Matthew, if I can come to you. So, at a large company like BNP Paribas, I mean, who is responsible for implementing cybersecurity? Is it all in the purview of the CISO, or there are other business leads or any of your colleagues that are equally responsible?
Thank you for your question. So I think between security professionals, we know the motto that security is everybody's responsibility. I think it's becoming more and more true for us. The CISO is having progressively a consultancy and advisory role, but at the end, given the ecosystem, which is becoming increasingly complex, we need everybody to be part of this activity. The IT teams, infrastructure development are absolutely critical in securing the data, securing the systems. They have to understand how and why. And now we are at a point where even the business users have a role to play. Only them can help secure their data. Only them know what is absolutely critical. And without their collaboration, I think we would not be able to put the right controls at the right place.
Got it. And Alissa, if I can come to you. So we heard from Asif about, how they go about looking at the data and really identifying the risk vectors. Interesting to hear your view in terms of how, the data security has changed for you, given the cross-border flows that you have visibility to, as well as the recent, crypto and all the other type of trading volumes and transactions we've seen.
So in terms of, the crypto flows and things that you mentioned, we really have to look at it from a holistic approach. We really have to look at it from an entire enterprise architecture approach. It deals a lot with how we look at fragmenting data, how we look at vendor sprawl, how we look at a lot of these different pieces of cybersecurity that are super, super important. Just to not boil the ocean, which is, I think, sometimes a lot of what technologists tend to do because we have so much in our purview. We take the opportunity to really look at scorecards. We look at an outside in and an inside out approach. Risk Recon gives us an approach that shows where all of our where all vendors are, and it helps organizations. That includes issuers, that includes acquirers, that includes merchants, helps them to proactively monitor and detect and act on security and cybersecurity risks across the digital supply chain. And so everything that you mentioned is a part of that digital supply chain. So we take an outside-in approach, looking at everything that touches that. From an inside-out approach, we look at CyberQuant. CyberQuant is one of those tools that gives us a cyber risk perspective. It presents different options that will help improve your investment decisions and resource allocations. And so both of those things I think are super important when you talk about it from a holistic, really big technology perspective and looking at the enterprise architecture as a whole. Great, thank you. And Sri, if I can come to you. So obviously there has been a shift towards public cloud and regulated sectors such as the financial services were initially slow to embrace public cloud, but we have seen, every sector is on that public cloud bandwagon. So just wanted to get a sense from you, what is the public cloud strategy and how does it tie into your overall, cybersecurity kind of implementation at BMO? Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Mandeep. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Thanks for having me on the roundtable. So yes, I think quite a few companies are embarking on the cloud journey, especially in financial services. There are multiple views here. One school of thought is, hey, let's only put the data, that's not super sensitive and not super confidential into the cloud. The other school of thought is if you look at national security agencies, CIAs, FBIs, they have all their stuff in the cloud in a very secure manner. So I think the key aspect here is, as security professional, how do I provide the guardrails to technology in such a way that the guardrails are implemented correctly for the right classification of data moving into the cloud? How do I secure the connectivity from my data centers to the cloud? and how do I secure the data like sitting in the cloud to transmitting it to the customers, and then also while the data is at storage. So different layers of different classifications will probably have different set of guardrails for protecting the data. And I would encourage the security professionals to be thinking about more from a service and business point of view, and how do we secure the environments based on classification, and how do we provide those guardrails? That's how I think about it, Mandeep.
Got it. And Corey, I know IBM has a big presence, when it comes to cloud, and they're trying to expand that side of the business, and they're a big provider of security services. So how have you been thinking about, rolling out new solutions to companies in financial services sector? Any thoughts around marrying the two, cloud and security?
Well, sure. I mean, we really kind of look at it around four, I guess, big buckets, or if you're looking at a life cycle. I mean, the first one is really advising, on the cloud, so what is the cloud strategy, your architecture design, and how is security and compliance strategy going to be integrated there? The second step is the move to cloud. So it really is on that migration and modernization. The third is then that build. So you've actually got to develop the cloud app development, DevOps cycle, multi-cloud infrastructure development, as well as enterprise application integration. And the fourth, or the kind of close that loop, is really on the manage, so how are you, doing the DevOps monitoring and management, the managed of the multi-cloud services platform, how do you do the managed infrastructure as a service, and then really that cloud security and resiliency. So really it is that life cycle, again, advise, move, build, and manage.
Got it. And George, if I can come to you. So when I look at cybersecurity and how fragmented this landscape was even prior to, the pandemic and the work from home shift, how have you guys, kind of gone about implementing or using these different cybersecurity products for different use cases? Anything that you can add, in terms of your personal or how you've implemented security at your company?
So just speaking in the industry in general, I think the vendor sprawl is pretty interesting. Had a especially hard hit in the cybersecurity sector, mostly because of the financial opportunity that exists for entrepreneurs. So first of all, picking the vendor, picking the right product, and identifying the need is a huge task. So it's fast changing, it's complex, it's a highly regulated in many respects, and it's a high stakes environment. So when you have that, I think failure has huge consequences. And I think it has to be avoided at all costs in some situations, or at least mitigated and managed as much as possible. So I think this spells money to entrepreneurs and to ordinary business folks who have knowledge on how to move widgets into enterprise license agreements. They see the opportunity. There's an overwhelming amount of, products out there. It become overwhelming to some degree, especially for small and medium-sized companies. So for large businesses, and I think large organizations out there, they've created their own innovation centers. And many of these innovation centers are located in places like Israel, in places that have new ideas and technologies are being born almost every day. And I think that, they have these innovation centers dedicated or personnel in these innovation centers dedicated to their architectural teams. And they're very in tune with what works in their environment. Some of these new technologies might not work in some of these environments because they have traditional architectures that are incompatible with these new products. So that's a big deal. No fault of the vendor themselves, but nonetheless, it's the reality of things. So I think in terms of implementing some of these products, it's really these innovation centers that have become very instrumental in making sure that you're picking the right product, it's compatible with your environment, and it's going to solve the problem that you're looking to solve.
Got it. And maybe Danielle, coming back to you, if you can give me a sense of what's the typical, replacement time. So what I'm hearing is, yes, there is need to upgrade your security, but then you have to try out the solutions, and there is a certain amount of pilot time that you have to spend with these new products. So Maybe just on that same point about fragmentation, like what is your approach when it comes to upgrading security?
I mean, it depends from how you define upgrading, right? Because if it is upgrading existing systems to the newest versions, then it's a matter of the usual release cycles, right? So this is not particularly sophisticated. If it is upgrading your architectures, then the selection process takes a bit longer, and the initial rollout is basically trivial. The real issue is scaling, right? Is getting to a full adoption, especially where you are sitting on very large, I would say, application estates. And depending on the dimension of the change that you are bringing in with a new architecture and security architecture, the time can be measured in years. Then the other element is the degree of distributed security you are rolling out versus central security. I mean, activating cloud WAFs is not trivial, but it's not a big deal compared to rolling out, inside every single application, particular technologies or particular handles. And so there is no simple answer. The last chunk is the one which goes into security by design, as somebody was saying, or even beyond when you consider the move the security is taking, which is bringing security away from a task of infrastructure. So you protect the boundaries of your universe, and it's starting to get let's say a level 7 type of activity, because this is profoundly transformational in everything IT has been doing in the past 30 years. And that is, again, is a cultural transformation that is measured in years. So to summarize, there is no simple answer. It depends on which side of the security you are upgrading and how big is the jump that you are trying to make with your upgrade.
Has maybe, and this is really open to anybody, or maybe Adam, you can opine on it first, but has this kind of the lead time or the implementation time change as a result of this heightened threat environment? I mean, are you guys deploying solutions at a faster pace than it used to be before?
Yeah, I think to address the changing landscape, we've had to get more comfortable with accelerating the deployment of certain things, or even the reprioritization of certain security capabilities, just to address, in the last 16 months, sending thousands of people to home offices. Well, you have to change your priorities. You have to refactor what you think is going to be delivered to an on-premises workforce versus a remote workforce. So I think there's that part of it. I also, when I think about how you position the question to Danielle, I think architecture plays a large role in defining patterns that you can then start to adopt, and that helps you with a rapid deployment of security capabilities, going from an enterprise architectural pattern to solution architecture to engineering and then deployment. That allows you to organize the conversation, set the priorities, figure out the use cases, and then start to move. And I think the other piece I would add to it is that I think the technology, when we think about strategic vendor partnerships, understanding the product lifecycle and the capabilities that some of the bigger vendors can offer us allows us to buy into an ecosystem, and allows us to take advantage of opportunities far quicker, because it's part of an ecosystem or platform that we're already operating inside of our enterprise. That allows us to move quickly. So rationalizing down onto a set of security partners is a really important piece to this puzzle as well.
Got it.
I think that I wanted to just hop in because Adam brought up some really good points. And one of the words that he brought up that I'm really, really passionate about is really the ecosystem. And I think now that we have a discussion coming about around software bill of materials and having that like ingredients list on the label, helps us to kind of give some insight into what we may expect from our vendors, or where we may tend to find other risks that we may not have known about. And so when you think about fragmentation, when you think about vendor sprawl, when you think about things like that, we kind of have to think outside of the box. And outside of the box means now, of course, looking at software bill of materials. I think it's a great way, and I wanted to interject that in really quickly before we lost track of some of the key points Adam brought up.
Sure, sure. So I guess a related question is, what have you guys found most effective when it comes to dealing with cyber breaches or even preventing cyber breaches? Like, is there a specific type of security product that works very well? Is it more, analytics based, or is it does it have to do more with training employees? Or just curious to get a sense of what is it that makes a security product effective, and how do you assess that, because this is what you focus on a day-to-day basis.
Nothing is good as the data. If the data is not good, the tool isn't good, your SOC isn't good, the team isn't good, the alerts aren't good. And so I think I keyed on certain words that you use, and you said preventing breaches. I think with the vast, crazy amounts of data that we get, your ability to coordinate and kind of play that game between the alerts and what the SOC is going to do is all going to be based on better analytics. I think that is going to be the key to how we move forward in preventing breaches.
So, and just to piggyback on that comment, so are these analytics something that you can produce in-house, or you have to rely on external third-party products to really help you aggregate this data or the analytics, and then you can rank it internally because you know the business much better than the third-party vendor would?
I just believe in strong partnerships. Before I, let everyone else hop in, I just believe in really strong partnerships. I think that while we have some internal teams that do a really, really good job of sharpening the pencil for us and making sure that we have the right analytic tools inserted, there's also an outside third-party vendor relationship that we have to have. I don't think there's a problem with checks and balances. I don't think there's a problem with overlapping. I think right now we're at an arms war, right? It's an arms race, actually. And so the more arms that I have, the better I am at winning the race. And so I'm a person of belief of firm partnerships in order to be successful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would agree with Alissa. I think to really deal with the constant changes in the threat landscape, you have to become an insights-driven security organization. And that isn't a data organization that is driving insights from the data. And I think historically, we've been very good at building these stovepiped centers of excellence for application security, vulnerability management, whatever those things are, those components of security. But where it becomes really, really helpful is when you can start to drive insights from all of the data that each one of those services is creating. And then you can hand that off to digital hunters and red teamers and pen testers in your SOC and get them to start making better decisions about where they want to focus their remediation efforts, their prevention efforts, or policy development, whatever it may be. But becoming insights driven is going to be key.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, Mandeep, I just want to step in for a second. I would agree. I just want to make a comment on the analytics, and I think the analytics is extremely important. Probably one of the most important things when you're looking to prevent these types of attacks. But I don't think sometimes there's not enough emphasis on how you use the analytics and the business models that you implement to use them. And I think it's a really big deal, especially information security. I'm a big believer in this intelligence-led, threat-focused, constant learning model. And this is a methodology, and it's a business model. I look at it as a business model. It's a management philosophy on how you organize and how you manage your information security initiative. And it takes this analysis that we're talking about, you couple it with forensics, and then you support this situational awareness throughout the whole organization so that you enhance this strategic decision-making. And that's what it's really about, right? Having the right information at the right time that's accurate and timely. And if you break down this model into this like small variant of the people, process, technology sort of consulting thing that we always do, I kind of look at it as talent, teamwork, tradecraft, and technology. And if you break it down into those 4 different buckets, you really start to organize your organization to get to this integration and fusion that you're looking for so that the right people have access to these positive outcomes and all this analytics that you're doing. And if you work through principles in your strategy, like being completely threat focused, assimilating these actionable intelligence into the decision-making process. We talked about information sharing and building that foundation of information sharing across your whole organization, that team of teams concept. That's what's really going to make that analysis and those analytics useful. And that's when you're going to be able to implement it and help prevent these sophisticated cyber attacks.
Got it.
Just to add another point, like one of my learnings in the analytics space is like previously I used to start with what data I have and then build analytics on top of it. But then taking a reverse approach as to what we need to get out of the analytics and then look for the data and bridge that gap makes it much easier kind of stuff. So that was one of my learnings in my journey.
Okay, great. And Matthew, maybe, look, I feel like with the rise in the ransomware attacks, there is that risk that your critical systems can go down. And I just want to know from you, how do you think about creating backups for your critical systems and just what's the overall strategy? Because it could happen to any company, no matter how much you spend or how focused you are on cybersecurity. So any thoughts there?
That's a very critical and a very trendy question, right? I think I've been seeing some random statistics that even today, even with all the awareness and all the news about breaches every day, we still have like 75% of firms which are unprepared for this type of attacks. And unprepared means they do not have the right backups or they do not know how to use their backups. So there are a lot of ways to consider that, and it could deserve a full session by itself. When I think about backup strategy, the first thing that comes to mind for me is what do I want to back up? I need to identify the most vital and important processes for my business, which I want to focus on, to prioritize. I need to make sure that I back up not only the data, but also the underlying applications that are going to be able to run this data. And once I have identified this data and once I have it secured through a backup, I need to make sure that my backup itself, my backup platform, my backup tool is not going to be the victim of a ransomware attack. It's not going to be the system that gets actually done and available to me. So that's where IT architects and information security analysts have to put in place the right controls, make sure that the backup platform itself, as a standard critical application, gets the proper controls in place, proper network segregation, proper access control, hardening, pen test your backup platform. All that is absolutely critical. At the end of the day, in case of a ransomware attack or any kind of destructive attack, what you need is basically to have your backup, your DR, whatever system you're going to use to recover your business and restart it. You need that to be as air-gapped as possible from your corporate environment. So you can do that on site. You can use quite brand new technologies, data diodes, other things like that to replicate your system, to have your own network within network. Or you can also leverage the opportunities of the cloud, private clouds, things which are not physically air-gapped, but virtually enough, and that can help you to create a backup environment which is going to be fully isolated from your network.
So I guess just on that point, so if you had the option, and I know you have to think about backups and making sure critical systems are up and running, but if there's one thing you would want to change in your enterprise IT architecture, what would that be? And assuming time is not a constraint and budget is not a constraint, like what is it that you would want to change in your IT architecture?
If I were to jump in, right? So it's like we're trying to put like a square peg in a round hole kind of stuff, right? The reason why the backups were initially started were because of a computer failure or a disk crash or like a data corruption kind of stuff. That's why the whole concepts of backups came in. But now we're talking about a cyber attack, ransomware, where your whole computer is encrypted. So I would start with the underlying, sort of problem statement and then redesign the solution. If you look at sort of the backups, you're only backing up data today mostly, most of financial institutions or organizations. But in case of a ransomware, right from your file system to your operating system, everything is encrypted. You won't have access to it. So how do you create effective backups and segment the backups out of your network in such a way that you're able to restore it in a timely manner? And are you able to test that? And at what point will you recover? So your recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives completely get thrown out of the window. It's a completely shift in paradigm, shift in the solutioning to the particular problem statement. So I would start with that and go from there.
Okay. And go ahead,
If I-
Alissa.
If I had a magic wand and can change anything in the enterprise architecture, I would make everything zero trust. I would have just started out with that budget, budget beware, no problems there. It would definitely be zero trust. And I like someone else mentioned it, I think said it a lot better, implicit trust. I like that word. I would just rip the Band-Aid off. And we can't do that now because of legacy systems that that companies have, and so where it makes sense, I think we need to aggressively go towards a zero trust model. But if I had all my dreams to come true in the technology world, it would be definitely a zero trust architecture from the start.
Asif, would you agree? Since I guess you're the closest to Mastercard in terms of the IT architecture.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think zero trust or explicit trust or beyond corp or beyond prod, whatever we want to call it from a marketing term perspective, is the future and is exactly where we all need to start driving towards. I think there are underlying levels of engineering and architecture that need to come into place, like the conversation around public cloud and what role does public cloud play in that kind of scenario. What do we have to build internally versus what we can buy from the ecosystem? Because the industry isn't ready yet, by the way. In spite of the fact that everybody says that they're enabling zero trust, the industry isn't ready for the scale and the complexity of a traditional financial service organization. And PayPal isn't really a traditional in that sense with some of the other banks here, but still there are complexities for companies that have been living in this world for tens of years or hundreds of years in some cases, versus companies that were spawned on the cloud and are architected differently. I will say one thing on the conversation on ransomware, though I'll use my podium right now. I think we're talking about backups, but we mean resiliency and recreation. And we need to start changing that conversation from, it's not just about backups. Backups is one silo, one capability that we need to master in managing crisis scenarios, and they can be based on ransomware or on any other thing. There is a lot of other things that we need to do. And the ability to quickly recreate an environment, which includes network, it includes file systems, it includes data, it includes applications, it includes a lot of different things, is really what we need to, as an industry, set our goals towards. And that means that we need to have our processes right. We need to have, our executives need to know what they need to do in that kind of scenario. We need to have awareness. It's not just a technology solution of backing something up and putting it in a different network. So just a call for action for everybody. We need to get to a point where we speak a bit differently about recovery, recreation, and resiliency.
Got it.
Yeah, Mandeep, this is George. I just want to piggyback off those comments from my fellow speakers. And I'm totally in agreement on zero trust. And I love me some zero trust, right? I think it's a great philosophy to follow. And also the comments that were just made about some of the more basics, right? Some of the principles, like some of the basic things that we need to start doing around our architectures and addressing some of these challenges. I was talking about digital transformation earlier, and I was talking about the advantages of organizations modernizing their enterprise architecture. And I think, some of the more prevalent challenges stem from traditional architectures that organizations struggle to solve, is things like managed siloed data. And we're talking about analytics before, and this is really important. So the importance of getting data into the right hands of those decision makers, as I mentioned, is when they need it, I think is so critical. And they need to make these informed, critical business decisions. Also think that the lack of responsiveness in some of these architectures is often problematic, right? I mean, businesses are leveraging modern technology architectures like cloud services and serverless concepts, and they're able to move and they're able to manage the changes in the business landscape, and they move much faster than their traditionally architected counterparts. So, working with an architecture that can move when you need to move, I think is obviously much more advantageous than working with a rigid traditional architecture. And I just want to mention technical debt. I mean, I think it gets overlooked a lot. I think it can be very burdensome, especially for some large organizations. I've seen some very large organizations with massive technical debt. I think it has wide-ranging implications at times in many different areas, including the business. It has financial impacts, of course, but the longer the technical debt remains outstanding, the more complicated and expensive a restore can become. So it's very easy to put it off. I mean, if things are going okay as is, and you're getting by, then fine. But eventually, you kick that can down the road long enough, and you're going to get to a point where maybe you can't upgrade soon enough until you get into an end of life phase, and then you have a situation where unpatched and unsupported technologies can become a very burdensome and huge security vulnerability. So some of the basics and the architectures that I'd like to see changed across the industry.
Got it.
Yeah.
So Corey, is there an out-of-the-box solution to implement zero trust that IBM has?
Well, so I guess let's kind of clear the air around zero trust. Zero trust is not a solution. It's not a technology. Think of it as a philosophy. It is a way to, well, I guess it's a, as we explain it, it's really, there is a governance model that we have implemented there. And it's really about, defining the content, the context, verifying and enforcing those contexts, and then resolving incidents that come out of that. Again, I will say that, there is no one magic turn. No amount of money can buy a zero trust tool or solution. It's a kind of a linear thought process of getting to that point where, as we've all seen, what we have implemented thus far in all of our professional careers, it hasn't got us to a point where we are secure. So we know in order to get to the next chapter, zero trust is going to be that model that's going to get us there.
Got it. And Adam, so maybe I want to come back on the efficacy of security products. So I know, for a company like RBC, there are thousands of security companies that they pitch their products to you. And, I'm curious to hear if you look at a particular set of metrics when you are evaluating these security products, or how do you go about making decisions around which solution to implement or going about it?
Yeah, so again, we typically start with architecture. We'll bring the architecture folks to the table, the engineers to the table, but we also bring in the practitioners. And these are kind of the best and brightest minds that we've got on both sides. We've got attackers and defenders. And we will put the security products through their paces. And we've got tools that enable us to look at things like the MITRE attack framework and align to the common attack trees that we would see, threat actors leveraging. And we can automate testing against those tools to see how they perform. But we're also looking at it more from a use case life cycle. So it's not just about implementing a rule or implementing a piece of technology. It's, we've got a policy. How fast does it detect? How fast does it alert into the monitoring systems? What's the data fidelity that our people that are making decisions about how to remediate? How do they view the data? I think the scalability of the tool, somebody mentioned it earlier, is making sure as part of this ecosystem that we're creating, it can scale up across an enterprise that's, a couple of 100,000 endpoints. So there's a few metrics, Mandeep, that we would look at. And I also think there's a time to market. How fast can we synthesize intelligence into policies and signatures and rules in those products? How complex is the tool to operate? And when we kind of bring all of those folks together, you start to get different perspectives on how the tools operate in the environment. How does an attacker leverage an endpoint product versus a defender inside of a security operations center and the information that endpoint product creates for them? So there will be a few metrics in there that we use to manage performance, but fidelity is also something that we're looking for when we put those products through their paces.
Got it. And Danielle, maybe if you can, Alissa, did you want to add anything there?
Because Adam mentioned a life cycle, and one part of that life cycle that we tend to forget is decommissioning. That is a part that we tend, and that's where the technical debt comes from. We talk about a good asset inventory. We're talking about physical assets. We're talking about digital assets. And as you grow and have to build, you have to know what you have. You have to know what you own, what's in your environment, and you have to be able to put a period at the end and decommission it. And a lot of times we don't do that. We keep it, and because we'll say, oh, this thing, it does this one little thing that I really, really like, but I'm going to continue to add other products into my infrastructure. And that's sometimes where the problems are. We have all of these now little special things that we like and love and have forgotten about. And so I wanted to bring home the point that Adam mentioned was life cycle. And part of that life cycle is decommissioning.
Got it. And so maybe Danielle, you can start this one first. So if you had to point to the percentage of, security deployed using internal products versus external solutions, is that a metric you care about or you have a sense of?
No, reality is I don't care.
You don't? Okay.
No.
Anybody else? Just for the audience, if there is, any framework around, okay, maybe 35% of the security is done using internal products, but then the remainder 65 is done using external products, firewalls, combination of, third-party vendors.
I think we have to be at a point where we don't care. We have to know, because when you start saying I'm biased towards one way, I believe that you have to know what you're good at. I have to know, as the Deputy CISO of Mastercard, what I'm good at and surround myself by the people that make me better. I have to know from an architecture perspective what my team is good at, what we are good, in-house solutions we're good at building, and then bring third-party partners in with me to help strengthen and bolster what I can't do well. And so I don't think I'm not sure if anyone on this panel would say, no, I'm all third party, or no, I'm all internal. I think a good balance, it's what is your balance? Are you good with containers? Or are you good with, insider threat monitoring and building those type of tools? You got to know, you have to know your team, know your culture, know your risk and your risk tolerance and risk acceptance in your company. And then you can really answer that question as well.
And Corey, maybe if I can come to you. So is there a particular area in your security suite where you have seen the sales cycle has shortened because of this heightened threat environment?
Yeah, but first I'll just kind of jump on that initial point of the, being open. I think everybody's kind of spot on. You can't be fragmented. You can't be locked into a specific vendor. There is no one single perfect solution out there by any means. And then to get to your point on, a specific product or solution, we're starting to see that where specific challenges lies are in the gaps on those connection points between vendors. You really need a single pane of glass, a solution that can look across all platforms, various cloud service providers, different security products, and pull it all together so that then the limited analyst that the specific company has, that can really break down and drive through, all right, these are the most critical risks, and not have to really kind of look across those products. So there is a solution across there, still working through there. But again, getting that single pane of glass is absolutely critical across vendors, across cloud service providers, et cetera.
Got it. And I know we have 5 minutes left. So I did want to touch on just the workload migration to public clouds. But before that, is there any other thing that you feel is important in the security discussion that we haven't touched on? Anybody?
Mandeep, maybe I'll just close the loop on the point that Alissa was making, because I think we've talked a lot about the vendor sprawl going on in cybersecurity, and I'd like to go back to the insights-driven organization that we talked about a little bit earlier. There are lots of really great security products out there, but what really drives the value is when you start looking at the data and you start bringing insights into that data coming together and start making smarter decisions off of the data that those products create. There's lots of good products out there. The investment, I think, internal investment is really around the analytics, creating insights so you can make smart decisions about what you need to do.
Got it. Thanks, Adam. So yeah, before I jump to the workload topic, anything else that anybody wants to add in terms of their unique kind of architecture when it comes to thinking about cybersecurity or anything else?
I'll share something.
Really. Adam says he is really, really good words. I've known him for such a long time. He said insights, and I'm going to steal that. I'm going to start using that in some of the things that I say, because you got it. That drives us past the analytics. That drives us past the data, and that moves us to intelligence. And so I think that is really, really key. So thank you, Adam, for highlighting that.
Okay. Matthew, did you want to add anything?
Just on my side, I find we've talked a lot so far about tools and about data. I didn't find we talked enough about people. And for me, it's so critical for my organization, for the way we operate, to have the right talents, the right people. That's paramount to leverage those tools, to understand this data, to act on this data. And one of the challenges that I think we should all be observing in the market today is a shortage of those talents. I personally struggle to get enough qualified candidates to fill my positions and to contribute to the program. So I just want to insist on that. I think we always will need more people, more talented people. I know that some programs, some university courses are getting in place to get us fresh talents out of school. I think we have a lot to do also in terms of internal preparation and helping our colleagues getting the right talents, the right skills through internal mobility to help us and contribute to our program.
Asif, where are you getting all your cybersecurity folks?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll use this. We're hiring a lot right now, so if anybody's interested. No, I'm kidding. I think it's a mix of geolocation strategy and understanding where talent resides and being there. One of the good things that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic is that we've moved to working from home, which opened up how we think about remoteness and how we are able to tap into talent in areas where we weren't originally located in. And I think that's a really, really strong proposition that we have in bringing talent that we didn't think about in the past. We're also very open from where we get talent. I'll be vulnerable here. I never finished my bachelor's degree. I tried to go for it, but life happened. And the fact that I didn't finish a bachelor's degree doesn't mean that I'm not a good security professional. I mean, there are people that come from very, very diverse backgrounds and places, and we need to make sure that our hiring pipelines include everybody in that consideration. And I think that if we as an industry start looking at that, there has been a lot of debate about certifications and degrees and stuff like that. I think capability and more important than anything else in security, passion, drive, intelligence are the things that will get us there. And really building our own talent. We've had some very good successes with bringing people that's been in PayPal for years and we're passionate about cybersecurity. Now they're some of our best security professionals because we have allowed them an internship-like solution. So I think all of these things are going to help solve the gap, but there is definitely a talent shortage and a gap.
Sorry, go ahead, Alissa.
I think what this talent shortage has opened our eyes to is that we can move past STEM. We focused so much in the past few years on STEM being where we get cybersecurity talent. You know, we can get cybersecurity talent from artists. Those are from creative thinkers that think outside of the box. And so now we've kind of looked and said, well, wait a minute, we can't just focus on STEM careers and STEM fields where we bring in that talent. We have to look at all of these other fields that are outside of the box thinkers, think differently, look differently, act differently, and will click on things a little bit differently because guess what? The adversary is targeting them too. And so they have a different view than we do because they're not technologists, trained technologists, but will definitely have a different methodology, a different mindset that they can bring in and enrich a technology organization. So we've kind of taken that talent shortage and talent gap and said, well, wait a minute. We can now that we're grabbing from STEM careers, what can we do to grab from non-STEM careers to enhance the entire organization?
And Shri, I wanted to come to you. So, you keep hearing about all these attacks, and every attack is different. In one case, it will be a third-party supplier. In some other case, it will be a phishing attack. So every attack vector is different. So from your perspective, how do you decide what vector to focus on? And to the point about, finding that talent, you may not have everybody who is an expert in phishing attacks or, third-party attacks. So what's your approach when it comes to the variety in the threats that are out there? You're on mute, so you may have to unmute.
Couple of things, Mandeep. So one, is like learning from the industry, like what are the attacks, like, sort of what are some of the control failures, and then applying that back to the organization that I work in and see, like, sort of, is it applicable or not? Do we have the right control environment or not? And then, like, sort of where to invest, what and where not to invest is a more of a risk discussion, prioritization discussion kind of stuff. And we have a methodology that we follow as to where our control weaknesses are and where to zoom in. And we follow that to the T. And every time, back to your point, if there's a new learning from the industry, we take it, apply it back to our methodology, see where we are, like, sort of good, where we are not so good. And then we adjust the investments accordingly.
Got it. So I know we are a little over, so we have final 4 minutes. And this is my favorite question. So what keeps you up at night, given you deal with cybersecurity? And anybody could go in first.
I can jump in. I think it's changed for me over the last few years. It used to be the compromise, but I think we've gotten to a point where our program is very good. I think for me, it's making sure that we can enable the business and not be a barrier for the business. And that requires a different mindset. Being able to move quickly, rapid risk management, rapid risk modeling, all of that sort of stuff. And I think, if done right, security can be an enabler to the business.
Got it. Matthew, do you want to add anything there?
What keeps me up at night, I think, is our increased cyber threat intelligence. The fact that now some barriers are falling and we are getting more and more insights on the capabilities of adversary, state-sponsored, professional criminals, etc., makes us realize even more that when we were driving a compliance-driven program, in a way, things seem to be under control. Now we see that if you are not extremely reactive, if you don't anticipate 0 days exploits, you know that your company is going to get attacked, and you are not going to be able to be proactive against that.
Danielle?
Mandeep, everybody has had this has been a very, very technologically rich conversation. But I want to make sure we drive home the point. What keeps me up at night is our people. Everyone will at some point, or may at some point, fall victim of being impacted by a breach or a participant in a breach. And so what keeps me up at night is our people, whether it's our staff, whether it's our customers, whether it's other businesses, my peers. It's making sure we have a security-minded culture and that we're doing everything that we're doing, because we have so many smart people on this call right now, on this platform right now.
Except me.
We're going to fix the technology. To me, the technology is the easy part. It's the culture, it's the people that's the harder part, because we all have heartstrings. And so that's what keeps me up at night, making sure everyone knows what they should do if something happens and how to report it. But doing that without implementing a culture of fear. I don't want to.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. And I know you were saying something.
What keeps you up at night is, it rotates from night to night. So everything that has been said so far. Plus, I would add the subject of supply chain attacks, but not necessarily in the sense that has been emerging in the SolarWinds stories and the latest stories, but more in the sense on, how do we protect our own tools and instruments to manage IT? It was mentioned the DevOps stack before. My security crew is confronted by me with the question on, how do you protect my DevOps stack in a way which is even more solid than protecting our payment systems, right? Because if my DevOps stack get compromised, and I don't know, right? Anything can happen, and that protection of my own supply chain is one of the things that is a bit of a blind spot in the cybersecurity conversation currently looking around, and I feel, looking at what is happening outside and assuming it's going to, to swamp inside, is one of the things that we need to start treating.
Okay, unfortunately, we have to wrap it here. So a final thank you to all of you who participated in today's event. We will send you the event highlights article once it's complete, and a special thanks to our sponsor of the event, IBM. And with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you all again for participating, and we'll catch up some other time. Great.